Video production's always been my passion since high school. Really have never put a camera down since high school. If you can tell a story, you can make people believe anything. Podcasting is this next phase of storytelling. When you sit down and you have a long-form conversation, you can really get to know the person. Every business can benefit from a podcast. Having good quality audio is a cheat code. To have this studio to further my career and the things that I do is one thing, and that's great, but also to have this studio and offer it as a resource to the community is kind of like the icing on top.
Welcome to Rock Solid, the Round Rock Business Leaders Podcast. Join your host, Bryan Eisenberg, as he explores the journeys of entrepreneurs and companies across Round Rock, Texas. From startups to large organizations, each guest shares their passion for doing business in this thriving community. Let's dive in.
Hi, I'm Bryan Eisenberg. I am here at Round Rock Studio, actually with the founder of Round Rock Studio, Brent Pierce. How are you doing today?
Howdy, I'm good. Thanks for having me in the studio.
Well, thanks for having us here today. I wanted to talk specifically today a little bit about your background, a little bit about audio and video content in today's business world, and of course, get a sense of vision for what you're doing here in the community to support some of those businesses. So let's roll back. We met just about a month ago at Round Rock Chamber's Entrepreneurial Town Hall, and we were talking about some of the things that are going well and the things that Round Rock has done great for our community, but also things that might be missing. What was your biggest takeaway as a local business owner from that event?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm a young, I'm a new entrepreneur in my career, right? Compared to other people like yourself and Bill who have kind of been in the community.
A little more gray hair.
Yeah, I know. I got it though. I got it. I got a little bit going. So anyways, yeah, it's great to connect with people who are much better than me at running a business. Because even though I do have a successful business and a successful career, I'm still nowhere near as good as a lot of the other people. And so initially, that's my favorite thing about going to those events is just being able to talk with people about their experiences. And whether you're talking about business or whether you're talking about your favorite place to eat, it's always great to brush shoulders with more experienced entrepreneurs than yourself.
It's interesting you say that. Last night, I was having a conversation with an entrepreneur I've been mentoring for the last 7 years. And he was talking about his success with some of his colleagues from his team and some other people. And, he was saying, so, I just work harder than everyone else. I was like, no, it's not just work harder. Work harder is important. But it's what you just mentioned. It's you have to have a certain sense of ego and pride in what you do, that you're good and you're good enough for what you do. But you also have to have just enough ego to say, hey, I can learn from others. I can seek out knowledge and wisdom from others who've done things bigger, different than I have, and gain from that. And I said, having that as an entrepreneur is probably one of his greatest super talents because he was always open to coaching, sought out mentorship. That's a difference maker. And so, the fact that we're here and you're opening up the studio to the entrepreneurial community here in Round Rock says a lot about who you are. And I think it probably stems from a lot about your background. And so if you can fill us in on how those values got established in you and how you got to where you are opening up this Round Rock studio.
Yeah, I mean, you never get in my career, I didn't get to where I am just by myself, right? There's always been people who are better than me or people who I've looked up to and who have mentored me that have helped me get to my next step in the career. Yeah, and I love the phrase, I don't know exactly how the phrase goes, but instead of asking, what should I do to get this done? Instead ask, who should I call to get this done? Because I guarantee you there's somebody out there who's done what you're doing or who is smarter than you at XYZ. And so, yeah, I think just having a solid network has kind of always been part of my career, I guess. My background is church media. That was kind of how I first cut my teeth after graduating community college. I did video and music in community college, and I loved it. And then I got a job doing video production at a church just after graduating. And obviously, there's huge community involvement with a church. You have volunteers, you have coworkers, and all that stuff. And yeah, so I cut my teeth in the church world, and I was doing church media for 8.5 years, something like that. So kind of mostly through my 20s, I was in the church world doing video production. And within that environment, I really learned how to tell a story with video production. Video production's always been my passion since high school. I took a class, I loved it, fell in love with it, and really have never put a camera down since high school. And so the church world really taught me how to use that camera and use editing to tell a story. Because if you can tell a story, you can make people believe anything. You can make people do anything. And that's what marketing is, right? You're telling a story to convince people to buy the thing or sign up for the thing or whatever. So yeah, I resigned from my position at the church in 2017, started my video production company in 2018, and have been doing that ever since. And then 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to open up this studio. We had enough capital saved up, and I had enough risk aversion or whatever you want to call it to take that leap of faith and to take the risk and to open up this studio. And it's been all the things that you can imagine when you're starting a new business. It's been stressful, it's been rewarding, it's been exciting, it's been frustrating, it's been all the things, but I absolutely love what I do. And so to have this studio to further my career and the things that I do is one thing, and that's great, but also to have this studio and offer it as a resource to the community is kind of like the icing on top or the cherry on top. You know, like people come in here and there's a lot of photographers that show up and they have a vision and they want to get the job done. And this studio allows them to get that done, right? They're not shooting headshots in their garage. They're shooting headshots here. And their headshots are going to look better because all of a sudden something inside them opens up whenever they're presented with a professional large studio. And then the podcasting we started about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And I have a huge passion for storytelling, and I feel like podcasting is this next phase of storytelling, right? If you look at the old radio hosts back in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that industry, I feel like has influenced the podcasting world, and that industry has kind of changed into what we call podcasting nowadays. So yeah, if I can offer this as a resource and use my experience to allow the community to learn podcasting and explore opening up their own podcast, that's amazing.
Yeah, I won't tell you the year I first started my podcast, because if I told you, I think when you tell me how young you were, I probably feel very, very old.
Did you record it to vinyl and then just ship out vinyls?
It wasn't quite there. It was on webmasterradio.fm, and we recorded a podcast, and I think the year was probably, I'm going to say 2000, 2001.
It's early. You're a pioneer in the internet world.
It was way early. And even back then, I knew enough. They handled all the production. So we called into the studio. They cleaned everything up. They did a fabulous job with that. But yeah, there's an intimacy to podcasting and to video casting that you just don't get in most traditional marketing. And I think we can talk about storytelling, or as I like to say, finding a way to create a legend, because legend makes a story that people pass on and want to share with others, because that's even more powerful. But this intimacy of having these conversations, of not being overly polished, just, feels like a TV show versus this conversation that we're having. Why do you think, and again, you're from a very different generation, why do you think it's caught on and it's become so important for businesses to embrace that in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to polish up a commercial and make anything look good for a 30-second spot or a 2-minute spot or whatever. But you're right, when you sit down and you have a long-form conversation, like, you can dive into the weeds. You can get into the weeds. You can talk about what you want, and you can really get to know the person. We recently got through a political landscape, and what I loved the most was when Donald Trump, love him or hate him, he went on Joe Rogan's podcast, which is great. So that was like 3 hours of them just talking. You know what I mean? So you really get to know the person a whole lot more than just a short little TV spot where it's definitely edited and it makes them look good and all that stuff. So yeah, podcasting allows the ability to like really dive into stuff.
Now, if I'm a business owner and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I should be doing a podcast, is there no editing to the podcast?
There can be as much editing as you want to a podcast, because podcasts range from all over the place. Like there are long form 3 to 4 hour podcasts where people are just sitting down talking about anything that comes to mind. And there are also kind of short form, like 10-minute podcasts that are produced with music.
The 1 minute podcast. There's a couple of inspirational ones that I listen to that are absolutely just 1 to 2 minutes, and every day comes up with, and I'm like, it's just incredible to be able to make something that concise every day.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
And they're easy to digest. You can just, listen to it while you're walking out to your car in the morning. Like those short ones are easy to digest. So yeah, to get back to your question, like, yeah, I think businesses can definitely benefit from having a podcast where you sit down and maybe it's just one person talking to the camera, talking about why they do what they do. Or maybe it's a church where 2 people sit down and they talk about what's new in their ministry or what's coming up in their ministry and X, Y, Z.
Now, you have a range of different podcasts that get filmed here, right? People come in, they rent your studio, and they get to work with an audio engineer, right? So that makes sure they look good. They can also get the cameras, right? We got cameras here, so we can look good too. So they can have it on a video podcast, like on YouTube. They can also use the same media on like social media as well, right? But then it also gets distributed to all the podcast channels, the Spotify's, the Apple Podcast, the Google Podcast, well now YouTube Podcast, right? So they changed that. What kinds of businesses are you currently seeing? And out of all the businesses here in the Round Rock area, if you had to pick 2 or 3 kinds of businesses that are currently not podcasting, what would you like to see?
Ooh, that's a good question. First of all, the shows that we see, they range from everything, right? Like we have a husband and wife that come in and they do a show where they talk shop about family life, right? They talk about marriage, they talk about parenting, they talk about all the stuff, and they weave in a lot of humor and a lot of fun stuff in that as well.
That's awesome.
And then we also see podcasts from doctors who have a medicine practice.
Yep.
We have a technology company that comes in and does like an internal podcast where it gets delivered to like their installers and stuff like that. So anyways, it's kind of all across the board. And so, I mean, I think every business can benefit from a podcast, and you can put in as much effort as you want into this podcast. You can make it a big thing that takes you hours a week to produce, or you can just make it like a quick little thing where you got a phone and you're talking, you know what I mean? So there's a very low barrier of entry for podcasting. That's another thing I love about it.
Interesting. You mentioned, this family podcast, and I know, family is very, very important to you. What brought you and your family to the Round Rock area? I mean, we were just voted as, number 3 city to, live in with families. But what is it that attracted you to this area?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lubbock, Texas. Go Red Raiders. Yeah, I grew up in Lubbock, and my wife and I, when we were thinking about marriage and all that stuff, we kind of knew that we wanted to live in Austin. It was just like, that's a common story, right? People move from a smaller town to Austin because Austin has a great art community, right? It's great for photographers and videographers, which is of course what I wanted to do. So that was kind of always the plan, was to get married and then move to Austin, the Austin area. And then when we got here, the job that I had was in North Austin, so we moved to Cedar Park, and now we live in Hutto, and now I work in Round Rock. So like the North Austin, Williamson County area has been home since 2012. And I'm very glad that it brought us here, because I even if there wasn't anything keeping me here, we would still stay here because it's a great place to live, and it's a great place to raise kids and the whole 9 yards.
Let's talk about that. What is your favorite spots for you and your wife and your kids in the Round Rock area?
So before we had kids, the good old days, we call those, my wife and I had Fridays off. We had Fridays and Saturdays off, so both of our schedules aligned. And so every Friday morning, we would go eat breakfast, and then we'd go see a movie at Flick's Brew House. So definitely Flick's Brew House is like up there. We don't go much anymore because we have kids. We still go see movies, but we used to be weekly Flick's members, you know what I mean? And we would always eat breakfast at Cafe Java on Gaddis and A.W. Grimes, I believe.
I was just there this week.
So those are kind of our staples.
Yeah, they just won best coffee shop, I think best breakfast.
Oh yeah, well deserved, dude.
Yeah.
We were there, and we got to know like the waitresses. You know, they would know us when we come in, and so one of the waitresses invited us to one of her parties, and so it was a good old time. Yeah.
So let's do a hypothetical. Cafe Java, they're doing incredible. Could you see them doing a podcast, and what would the podcast look like for them?
If a coffee shop wanted to start a podcast, you could do new coffee, like new roasts that y'all are doing.
Yeah, I think certainly some of that. I think it's the coffee talk, right? I think it's the chit chat about what's going on, probably in the community. They're such a hub for the community. I just met my friend Will Williams there this past week. We were catching up on what he's doing with the Field of Honor up in Georgetown. There's just so much that happens there. Their generosity also plays a big part of, right? And their hospitality plays a big part of. And I think it'd be interesting to hear some of those conversations, and maybe for them to have some of their regular guests come in and have conversations and share what's going on in their community. I mean, there's so many avenues for a business to be creative and expand the way they tell their story.
Yeah, for sure. And again, podcasting has such a low barrier of entry. So like you don't have to come to a studio and pay money to get a podcast going. You just don't. Like I would love for people to, of course, because I would love to be a part of it and make it look good and publish it and make it, gain a ton of traction. But if you don't have the resources to do that, that's perfectly fine. Just use your phone. Like phones have great cameras nowadays, and they have great mics nowadays. So yeah, you can start a podcast with a few hours of planning. Like, of course, do the planning. Don't just like start recording, because then you're going to find yourself at a dead end pretty quick. Do a few hours of planning and then just press record and then press publish and get it done.
I've always said, all the new entrepreneurs I've worked with, all the people who I've helped start podcasts, all the people I've helped start YouTube channels, I said, you're going to look back at everything you've done in a year from now and you're going to cringe. And if you don't cringe, there's a problem, because you haven't figured out you haven't grown. You haven't figured out how to get better. So yes, they can start any way, any budget. But if they wanted to come to a place like this, because obviously this is an amazing studio. You've got a great photography space in the background. We can talk a little bit about that. But you also got a couple different sets for podcasting, again, for video, for audio. People can record audio books here. Tell us about the space so people understand how they would use it.
Yeah, so Round Rock Studio is a 2,800 square foot production studio. We have a studio in the back that focuses on photography and videography. So people come and they rent out that space and they capture photos from everything from business headshots all the way to commercials, right? Commercial photography. And then videographers do the exact same. So that gets used quite a bit. And that was step number one when it came to building out this studio. So we got that up and running. And then, the studio up front, we have 2 podcast sets that include 3 cameras, so we capture a podcast. We got mics, we got lights, we got everything you would need to get a podcast or even a YouTube channel up and running. Now,
I am not an audio engineer, but my mentor is a huge radio advertising guy. He spent a lot of time around there, so I do know a lot of audio people. And I know a lot of very, very successful podcasters and podcast researchers in the space, people like Tom Webster and Mitch Joel. And I mean, I've tons of my friends who've been doing this for a very, very long time. And they'll all tell you that the secret to grow a podcast is obviously having great quality audio and video if you're doing a video podcast. What's the difference? Like, how would the average Joe know the difference between, okay, I'm picking up a podcast that's done on the phone versus coming into a studio and working with an engineer?
Yeah, you can definitely tell the difference pretty quickly on what quality of equipment that people are using or what experience they have when it comes to editing pretty quickly. So, cinematography, my background is cinematography, right? Like I love cinematography. I love holding a camera and making the image look as good as possible. The secret to good cinematography is having good audio, which is a weird secret, right? But if you want your movie to look good, make it sound good. Because if it sounds good, people are going to immediately relate the two, and it's going to look good because it sounds good, and it's going to really immerse them into it. And so anyways, I can nerd out on cinematography and audio all day, but yeah, having good quality audio is like a cheat code, right? It's like one of the little secrets. And especially nowadays with AI and software that can process audio, like it's actually really easy to get really good quality audio. The times are changing. So you don't have to use a $500 mic in order to get it done. You can use a $50 mic and still get it done. So, and again, that goes back to the low barrier of entry. You can come and you can use thousands of dollars worth of equipment, or you can spend $50, get your own mic, and kind of learn how to use it, and you will still be able to achieve really good results.
So let's bring this around full circle. So we started off about, having this authentic storytelling voice and, the difference between having a commercial that's completely polished and having a podcast or a video shoot or the stuff that you use on social media that's produced professionally versus just on my phone. Why should people and businesses invest in that little extra for that quality, do you think?
I think to stand out from all the businesses in the world and all the businesses in your community, like you've got to do things better and you got to do things a little bit differently. And I think having a podcast is definitely the way to go, in my opinion. It's one of the foundations. There's definitely multiple things you could do to better your marketing, but I think podcasting is a great resource there. So, yeah, and if you have quality audio, quality video, and quality social media posts, like I think that's the way to go. So, with our podcasts, our clients come in, we record it, video and audio, of course, and we give them a video and an audio file that goes to YouTube and it goes to the podcasting platforms. And then from the video file, we create social media posts, right? We create small little snippets. They can throw them up on Instagram Reels, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, whatever the platform of choice is. And those are going to get way more views than the long form video. It's just the nature of the media landscape right now. People are going to watch a 45-second video, way more frequently than they are going to watch a 45-minute video. It's just kind of how the world works. So our clients come in and we deliver all that, and all of that leads to their success with their podcast.
And, we've all been on those Zoom calls where someone's had bad audio, and we know how ugly that can sound, and just it's disturbing, and no one's going to want to pay attention to that for very long. So, having a studio like this available in our community makes it really easy. Tell everybody a little bit about how they can access the studio, how they can work with a professional podcast engineer, and the other resources here, and how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, for sure. So our website is roundrock.studio. That's the website, roundrock.studio. And on there, you'll see the photography studio in the back. You'll see the podcast studio appear, and there's a form you can fill out that requests availability for podcasting. And I'm always open to give tours. We give tons of tours through here. So, yeah, I'd love to, I'd love for anybody to send me an email, and I'd be happy to give them a tour here.
And if they're just like, I would love to try podcasting, but I'm not sure if it's for me. I don't know what idea I should have for my business. Should they get in touch with you and have a conversation? What would be that next step, you think, for them?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we do consulting for new clients, right? A lot of people come in and exactly that. They want to start a podcast. They have kind of an idea of how they want to start, but they don't really know how to go from this point to that point and pressing publish. And we know that. So we hold their hands through the whole process. We consult with them and we help them come up, we help them from start to publish. We help them get off the ground.
That's terrific. I'm going to leave you with one last question.
Okay.
As you said, you're a little bit of a younger entrepreneur, but you've obviously had a great successful business here with the membership model to the studio, and obviously the podcasting studio and the video studio and all that. If you had to leave an entrepreneur today, maybe they're just getting started in our community, with some kind of strong tip about how they can help get their business to the next level, what would you be telling them?
Yeah, I would say any advice to any entrepreneur, I feel like I say this. Anytime there's a microphone in front of me, I feel like I say this. Your network is your net worth. And that is so true. And when I was younger, like I would hear that and I'd be like, yeah, okay, we get it. Like it's all about who you know. We get it. But now that I'm like a little bit older and a little bit more seasoned in my business endeavors, I totally see that. It's about who you know. You know what I mean? And yeah, you have to know what you're doing to an extent, but your network is your net worth. I love that line.
I agree. I included it in my last book as well, The Rice and Beans Millionaire. So
Nice.
100% agree with you. So now if they want to connect with you and ask you questions, can they message you like on social media? Like where's the best place to find you if they have a question for you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out a lot of days. I've been off social media for a while, so I don't really pay attention to Instagram DMs and stuff like that.
Okay.
Our website, roundrock.studio, or I'm on LinkedIn.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.